Welcome. We are starting a series this week, and it's a series that I personally am really excited about because we're going to do this week here, and then we've got the two following installations of this series are done at a Sermon 2.0 format with a friend of mine named J.D. Krause, who I've known for a long time, but I haven't seen him in a while, and Steve Stone, who you guys know. So that's a monologue sermon like you're used to, and then two dialogue sermons, discussions for the next 2 weeks. About a year ago, Lacey and I had to sit down and address some things that we saw, patterns that we had seen developing. And what triggered it, it wasn't that we sat down and go, we need to change some things. It was that we were observing some things in Jet that were concerning. Full stop. Jet is fine. Jet is 1,000% fine. But he had hit a growth spurt physically and, mentally. He'd hit this growth spurt at a time when we were the most busy. And what we saw starting to develop, we caught it early. Thank God we caught it early. But what had started to develop, it was like Jet, not sure how to fully live in this shell that was expanding and growing, had started to kind of shrink away from his new height. He'd started to kind of, his back had started around. And then, because we're our most busy doing all these church things that we were doing and all the other stuff that was added on our schedule, he was always in a room full of adults, and he'd started to kind of look away. That's like his coping mechanism. If you know Jet, he's not one to like engage you. In fact, it's part of his personality. He's okay being in the room and not having to participate. But in a room full of adults, his coping mechanism was that he would start to look away. He didn't feel like he was like speaking with his full voice. And as he hits this growth spurt, Lacey and I sit down and we recognize, her and I both, we recognize that he had started to almost turn inward a little bit. It's almost like life was drawing him out into this bigger shell, and his choice was he was trying to hide back internally a little bit. It resulted in things like wrestling, which someday we'll get to talk about that. Hilarious season of life. Hunting. He's been playing football. He started roping a little bit. But it started with a very uncomfortable conversation between Lacey and I. Some self-evaluation between us that said, hey, we're contributing to this a little bit. We are so busy. We are going so hard that part of what we're seeing develop in Jet, we've caused. We were the one that brought this about. When your child's well-being is at stake, when you see something like we need to be a part of the solution here, it's worth it. Whatever changes, whatever patterns you have to address, it's worth it. Okay, now let's take my story out of it. I think that half of what you are is nature. God birthed you into this world as the person that you are, and then nature gives way to nurture, and our environment, the world that we live in, contributes to the forming of who we're going to become. And I'm not talking about a bad day. I'm not talking about like who you are in a moment. I'm not talking about an injury. Someone who has a broken leg isn't a broken-legged person. It just means that that's that season. But I'm talking about different. Even a season is too short of a sample. Jet wasn't living at his full height or using his full voice, and it was developing. The nurture, it was developing over a long period of time in a direction that would have eventually caused harm. And I think all of us at some point in our life has felt this way, that it feels like we aren't fully living alive. We aren't fully living at the full potential. We don't know how to use our voice in an effective manner. We don't feel like we're living at our full potential. And if left unchecked, we're unhappy with the picture of what that's going to look like in the future. John 10:10 says it this way: the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, and I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Life more abundantly. Live at full volume. Live at your full height. Live in your full identity. Operate at full capacity. I think that's an interesting thing to be reminded of, is that God is interested in you living at your full capacity. Point one, we've got four. I think we got 4 points, but there's kind of a fifth, but nobody has 5-point sermons because I don't think anybody would stay around long enough. But if you're taking notes, here's the first point. Not the you of today, you tomorrow. Not you today, you tomorrow. Not who you are today, but who you could be tomorrow. Let's use the physical world to demonstrate where we're going. Like I said, these are the things that started in my life a year ago with this conversation with Lacey and I. If you take two identical twins that are physically almost hard to distinguish, they're the exact same physical person, and you were to put this one person in the gym and on a healthy diet, and you were to put this person on a couch and feed him Twinkies, A week later, they're both going to look pretty much the same. But if you continue that trajectory, you can make predictions about the future based on what? Patterns and habits. Patterns and habits, and how vitally important that is to the development of someone's health. That is no different spiritually. I would say that is exactly the same spiritually. And if we could use this as a placeholder, this is what Lacey and I said. It feels almost like we're operating with a flawed software. A software that's based on go, 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 go. Don't rest. We got to do this. A software that is reasonable in certain periods of life, but that reach an expiration date to go, I can't stay at this pace sustainably forever. And when we saw what it was starting to do to the people around us, what we said was, we need new spiritual software. We need a software that is more relevant to what God's doing in our life. Your software, your spiritual software is going to dictate things like your habits, your patterns. Your spiritual software is where we pull our choices and vision, things like that. It has a big impact on things that shape our lives going forward. Steve, I'm excited for you guys to hear the sermon from Steve here in a little while, but it's almost safe to say that the main thing that your spiritual software will do for you is it will shape your internal dialogue. It will shape the conversations that you have with yourself. These back and forth that you have, it gives the software that you choose, the software that you're the most loyal to, will dictate who wins those internal dialogues. Here's the hardest part, and I'm not giving away too much information. I think she'd be okay with me saying this. Here's what we came away with that day. We sat down and we're like, this feels flawed. This feels broken. This feels like we are going to have to make some changes. It's starting to negatively affect the people that we love the most. It feels like we need to pour into the people that we're closest to more, even if that means pulling back in other areas. She said to me, "You're getting mean." Not you were mean today. That's not what she was saying. Lacey was not saying you're mean today and I don't like it. She was saying the effects of burnout are starting to manifest in being grouchy or less tolerant. And I said, it sounds crazy if you know Lacey, but I said, I'm not saying this as a defense mechanism, but you're getting mean too. What are we saying? What are we saying in that moment? The patterns and the software is not producing the results that we want to see. It's not permanently broken. It's just that there's got to be a better way to do this. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. That's the point of what we're listening to. That's why we're recording this. That's why we're sitting down and giving words to a thought or an expression. That's why we're going to do what we're doing, is that if we can start to choose a healthier software, what we're going to see is that over a period of time, we're going to start standing at our full height, speaking with full volume, and becoming that person according to the kingdom software that God intended for us to be. Seems like a lot to accomplish in a sermon, I know. I don't think we'll fully get there today. As believers, if you're listening to this from like a third party, like I'm not sure if I believe what you say, completely fine. Let me tell you where ours is, because I think it probably applies that you need some sort of a designer's manual. If I want to get in physical shape, what I would do is I would go ask people who had researched what is good for the body. You know, everybody's different, and you'd start digging up how to see better, healthy results. Spiritually, where we go for that in the body of believers is we go to the Word and we go, God, is there anything in your Word that would help indicate a software that would help me operate to the benefit of those around me? What is the nature of God and what is the nature of sin? Because what was frustrating is I knew that the nature I was operating in this season of burnout wasn't a God thing. I was working for Him. You could almost say like that was my boss, but that was what was happening externally. And I felt like internally I was operating more in a sin nature. And when I say sin, don't panic, don't freak out. What I'm saying is misalignment. I felt like misalignment had snuck in and started to produce results I didn't want to see. Okay, like I said, the entire series is going to be in Luke chapter 11, verse 14, says this. Jesus was driving out a demon that was mute. When the demon left, the man who had been mute spoke, and the crowd was amazed. We're going to skip from verse 14 all the way down to verse 33, still Luke chapter 11. No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it will be hidden under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand so that those who come in may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body is full of light. But when they are unhealthy, your body is also full of darkness. See to it then that the light within you is not darkness. Therefore, if your whole body is full of light and no part of it dark, It will be just as full of light as when a lamp shines its light on you. These two examples, the guy who is mute and the lamp hidden under, what does it say? I just read it. A lamp hidden under a bowl. They're not fully exhaustive. Listen, we're not going to get all the way to the bottom of these two softwares, but what you can derive from this, what you can derive from Luke 11 is that it's the nature, the heart, or the core of two very different softwares, two very different life patterns, two very different ways of considering our internal dialogue, two very different operating systems by which to conduct your internal monologue or dialogue. This is point 3. Point 2 was choosing a software. Point 3, if you're taking notes, lighting and language. Language and lighting, the relationship between the language and the lighting. Verse 14, I want to start there. It says, Jesus was driving out a demon that was mute. Again, I know that there are going to be people who hear this and hear the word demon, and they're like, oop, here we go, kooky. Try to think of it this way, if it helps, if just to try to get out of what I'm saying today. Something that was misaligned, something that was not good, something that was less than best. I think we can all admit there are things that are evil. Now, whether we can say there's a source of that evil, however you want to frame that, there was something that was damaging that had control of a guy that was causing him to be silent. It was manifesting, whatever that source of that was causing this man to be silent. It was manifesting by keeping him quiet. The software he was operating under was silence, complete silence. And so it says, when the demon left, the man who had been mute spoke, and the crowd was amazed. If you think of Jesus as the Son of God, if you think of Jesus as God and man, fully God, or if you just think of Jesus as a good teacher, however you look at that, you can at very least say this. The software that whoever he is, when he is introduced into this man's life, silence was not the software. Jesus doesn't come in, see a man in silence, and not care. At very least, it mattered to Jesus that this man was unable to express what was going on in his head. If you're trying to decide on software, here's what I do know. Jesus does not want you silent. He does not want... Listen, he can live with you being wrong. He can live with you making mistakes. He does not want you to sink back and pull yourself out of participation of the discussion of the conversation. There are times you can choose to be quiet. That's not what I'm saying. Jesus does not want you to be silenced. I want to look at this just from a physical. I think this is so fascinating. If you would allow me, I'm going to nerd out for a second. I love what I'm about to look at. I remember one time someone talking about people who didn't utilize language. After a certain age, they lose it. They're never able to develop language again after a certain age. You go down a rabbit hole of why that is. It is fascinating. I'll read you just a 30,000 foot flyover. First of all, if you are reading words off of a page, you are activating the optic nerve. It's in your eye. You're reading it. The optic nerve. It is relaying that information to your visual cortex, the part of your brain that understands what you're seeing. If you're reading Braille, you're activating the sensory cortex. You are putting your fingers on something that is indicating thought or expression, and it is landing in a different part of your brain. If you're listening to someone else reading, if you're listening to someone else speaking, you're activating the auditory cortex. Different parts of your brain are activated in different ways of communication. That's all intake hardware. That is all your intake hardware in all these different areas. But that's just to take it in. If you want to turn around and physically speak, if your brain is going to allow you to take what's going on the inside and express it to the outside, here's what has to happen. The Broca's area of your brain forms language. That's what they were saying. If a child doesn't develop that part of their brain at a certain age, it begins to atrophy and it doesn't grow back naturally. It doesn't get brought back naturally. If your Broca's area at an age isn't activated, you lose the ability to use language. Your insular cortex, I know this is nerdy, but stick with me. I think it's fascinating. Insular cortex is the motor function of being able to speak. Your insular cortex in your brain. Your angular gyrus assembles formation into concepts. And you go, what are we doing here? Think of it this way. You have a part of your brain that forms the word part. If I say couch, I'm using language to indicate something that in a different language is a different word, but we're indicating that language. The motor function, the ability to form words, is different, is a different part of your brain. And it's a completely third part of your brain that assembles that formation of words and language and motor function into concepts. But there's a fourth part. There's a fourth part of your physical speaking, and that is your Wernicke's area of your brain. The Wernicke area of your brain works with all three of those to determine context and meaning. I promise it's not going to stay this nerdy, but here's where I'm going with this. If you damage the Broca's area of your brain, it can leave you with the ability to have cognitive thought, but can't express it through language. That's called expressive aphasia. You are unable to express what you are thinking. This is all physical. There's nothing spiritual about what I'm talking. This is strictly physical, and I'm going to tell you why that's important. If you damage the Wernicke area of your brain, it means you'll still retain the ability to use language, but you will not have the ability to understand. That is called receptive aphasia. There is a working together in concert when it comes to speaking that physically means that before words ever become sounds that come out of your mouth, they are first what? Discussed internally. Your brain has a conversation with itself first, and from that machine produces the words that come out of your mouth. It's a very smart sounding process for some of the stupid things that we hear people say. Because as mechanically as we can break it down in language, it does not speak to the condition of the heart that forms the words. Your brain can't speak verbally before it's first spoken internally. If you ever had a word, I do this all the time. I think it may be an aging thing where I can't think of the word. I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't think of the word. Ironically, I was having a conversation the other day and I was trying to think of the word incompetent. I couldn't think of it. I couldn't think of what that word was. And so I was saying, it's kind of like not being very smart. People are like, dumb. Like, no, it's not that. As soon as I hear the word incompetent, it pops into my head, then I'm able to speak it out of my mouth. Language, let me break it down this way. Language is expression that is first tied to illumination. In order to speak something, if the lights have to come on in my mind first. So he speaks to the man who couldn't speak, and he's able to speak, and everybody's amazed by that. Verse 34 says, your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body is also full of light. But when they are unhealthy, your body is full of darkness. There's a relationship in our software. There is a relationship between the illumination going on in our spirit and the words that are coming out of our mouth. As you sit here taking this in, whether it's digital, whether you're sitting in a group full of people, whatever the case may be, there is a relationship in your life between the lights coming on a specific topic and your ability to speak on it. I told Lacey this morning, I was like, we need to run by the Powell Butte store because I need caffeine. That would be better. It would be better if we ran by there first. Now, here's the argument. What does the word better in that case mean? Does it mean it's overall better? Does it mean it's just more desirable in the moment? Do you see the relationship? Now, all of a sudden, we're not just thinking about words coming out of our mouth. We're thinking about our relationship to the word and the concept of what is better. It's better to live for God. What does that mean? It's better to live for yourself. What does that mean? You see, we can have words with no illumination. We can use language and have no clarity on what that means. Kingdom software is not about spiritual silence, and it is not also about spiritual blindness. So many times, listen, there are people that aren't given words. And I'm not saying that that's a demon. Please hear me. I'm not saying that people who are unable to use language have some sort of a demon. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is I think sometimes if we're not careful, we begin to experience a phenomenon that feels like we're being silenced because of a battle that's going on internally. We're so confused by what's going on in life here that we shut down and we start to go internally because we're so confused about what's going on in life and we don't want to sound like an idiot. We don't want everybody to know that we're struggling or that we're having Look at all the mental health issues that people go through in silence because they're afraid. There's confusion and there's not clarity and they don't know what to say. And so they just start to shut down. We have language, but we don't have clarity. We see God healing people of their physical blindness where they're able to physically see. And I think that that is a demonstration of what God desires to do in our lives at a spiritual level. I do know this. I know that being silenced and someone turning the lights off have a very similar effect. They both invoke an emergency response. I've had dreams like this. I know that we've all had this. You have a dream and like the bad guy's coming and you're trying to alert your friend and you're like, and as hard as you try, the words won't come out. Like you are being silenced, and the panic that you feel when you're trying to make sound but nothing's coming out. Same with, if you ever had a dream you're being chased by a bad guy but you can't see where you're going. Probably like in the real physical world. What's happening in the physical world is that you're asleep in a bed and you've got covers on you. But what's happening in your mind is you're trying to move and it feels like everything's tripping you. And so it feels like there's a relationship between what's happening in the physical and what's happening in your dream. I think that in this software reboot, in this reconsidering a new software that allows us to live at our full height and at full volume, we have to understand how we arrive at a place of spiritual silence. I will tell you, I've been battling in my own life with spiritual silence since that conversation a year ago. I've been asking God, like, how do I put a framework around what you're teaching me? I haven't been silenced. Nobody's told me to be quiet. Nobody's cut my mic off, so to speak. But I feel like God almost sort of like unplugged my old operating system, and I've been going through this sort of a reboot, and I haven't had the ability to speak on it because I haven't had clarity on it. I haven't had the ability to speak with clarity because my language is the result of internal clarity, and I haven't really had it. If being silenced and being confused trigger an emergency response, then that means this. If we're not careful, the new software, if we're operating according to internal and silence and quietness and being silenced and being confused, in moments of being silenced and being confused, our new software immediately becomes fear. Fear is the operating software that determines everything. Every conversation, the most fearful voice wins. Every debate we have with ourselves, the most fearful outcome is the most probable. Every time we start to discuss like, well, I would say this. Oh, I can't say that. I might be wrong. I'll do this. Oh, I can't do that. It might fail. Oh, I could do this. No, people are going to turn on me. What did that person mean? They probably meant this. We start to create for ourselves a fearful environment. And because we're fearful, we're afraid we don't want to say too much. We don't say the wrong thing. And we begin to start shutting down. Remember, your software determines the patterns. The patterns like panic or reaction or anger or control or inferiority or confusion. Listen, I think if we're not careful, the church becomes a proponent of fear because we tell people that saying the right thing is the most important thing. Getting it right is the most primary thing that we do. Don't get it wrong. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't do the wrong thing. Don't sin. Don't mess up. Don't screw up until eventually what do? We encourage people to not live at their full height, or live at their full volume, and we call it religion. We actually install in people's lives the wrong software. They're looking for Jesus, and we install a software of fear. Don't say it wrong. Don't do it wrong. Confusion. Why can't I be better? Have you ever gone through that? Why do I keep screwing up? Why do I keep getting this wrong? What are you doing? You're battling through a dark room without lights, and you can't figure it out on your own. Like I said, I've kind of got 5 points, but it's only 4, so we're at the last kind of point. We're at the last point with an asterisk. And that is, without a voice and without a vision, you become a victim. With no voice, with no vision, you become a victim. I didn't even really intend to have 3 V words. It just worked out that way. With no voice, with no vision, you're a victim. Let me explain what I'm talking about. There is nothing that invokes panic in people faster than someone speaking on their behalf and getting it wrong. It doesn't matter which kind of personality it is. Lydia was just here in the studio talking to Jacob and Wesley and Lacey and I. And as agreeable a person as you can be, it doesn't matter who you are. If you have an agreeable personality and you just kind of one of those people who likes to get along, Lacey is definitely this. Even in people that are agreeable, like Lacey, don't want someone speaking for them. It invokes a panic response when someone represents your opinion wrong. When you lose your voice and you have to depend on someone else to speak for you, it invokes a fear response. No independence, no freedom, no standing at your full height, no speaking at your full volume. Listen, in Mark chapter 8, verse 22, I knew the story's in there. It took me a minute to find it. But it says, they came to Bethsaida, this is Jesus, came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man. The blind man begged Jesus to touch him, but that's not the part I'm focusing on. It's some people brought a blind man. Without vision, you become a victim. And what I mean by that is, I'm not saying physical. Listen, if you're here or if you're listening and you can't physically see, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm using physical as an example for what's happened spiritually, is that when you physically lose your sight, you become far more dependent on other people who can see. You have to attach yourself to someone with vision to lead you around, and you've got to take their advice, and you just have to follow where they lead you. The same thing is true spiritually, that when you lose your sense of vision and passion, you become a victim of someone else's vision because you just, it doesn't matter. I always get it wrong. I should be quiet. You do it. So we've really drilled down on losing your voice and losing your vision. But I'd like to wrap it up with this. How does it look? So I want to go back to Jet. I hope he's okay. I'm picking on him today. What I wanted for my son was for him to live at his full potential. For Jet to live at his full potential, Lacey and I felt responsible to interact with him in a way that was meaningful, to create a space where he could start to stand at his full height and look you in the eye and speak with confidence, things that he's now doing a year later. But we had to have a vision, like what would it look like? The reason it bothered us is because we had this idea of health for Jet and he didn't. And so because he didn't see the danger that was around the corner and we could, it required us coming in and going, catch a vision for your life. Catch a vision of what it looks like to live in your full potential. That's what I'm saying. What does it look like to live according to the kingdom software? The kingdom software that God's the one that determines your height. God's the one that gives you your voice. God is the one that says that determines your potential. Exodus chapter 2 only has two characters. The traditional view of this is that Exodus chapter 2 only has two characters. It is God calling Moses into a verbal position of leadership. And I also know this. Not everybody's going to be called into a verbal position of leadership. He's not going to ask everyone to speak in front of groups of people. But if we're not careful, that becomes a mechanism of silencing. What do we think? Well, Jordan says, the Pope says, not that I'm comparing me and the Pope, my teacher says, my coach says, my mentor says, my dad said, and we outsource our voice. If I'm not in the position of speaking, God hasn't called me to a position of speaking, or if I'm not sure exactly what God's doing in my life, I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to sink back. I don't have a story to tell. In my own life, I have felt, to some degree, silenced by my occupation. Hear me out. There's nothing faster to burn me out than to feel silenced and not feel free to operate in my actual identity because I'm afraid that people like see that and be like, that's not how a pastor is supposed to communicate. Listen, I'm going on record as saying this. I am not a natural shepherd. I can't tell you how life-giving that is to just admit it and go, I don't feel God drawing me into daily, interactive, I feel like I'm more of an innovator than an implementer. I don't feel, because when you think shepherd, he's a pastor, he's a shepherd, and nothing makes me feel more claustrophobic or turned inward, or nothing steals my voice faster than feeling like someone is forcing me into a role of implementation, and that's not who God called me to be. I face criticism for some of the areas where I'm not very good. In fact, in my own life, because I'm vision-oriented, it feels like I've always got some degree of vision. But when I'm pushed into a position of implementation, it feels like it robs me of my voice and I cause damage. And people are like, that just really hurt my heart when you said that way. And I'm like, okay, I just won't say anything else. Well, I don't want to cause harm. I'm so tired of the chaos of being surrounded by pain that I've caused by trying to fit into a position that I don't fit into, and I'm not living at my full height. I'm not operating my full voice. I'll be quiet and I'll withdraw and I told Lacey one time when we were living full time in Oregon, I feel like on Sunday mornings, this church kind of pulls me out of my little box. It shows me up on the stage. I do my little dance, and it shoves me back in for 6 more days, and I'm completely useless. I'm not living in my full potential, and I know it. And I feel like people who know me know it. That is not kingdom software. When men walk into a worship setting on a Sunday morning and we're told, cut your hair, dress nice, don't be bad, be good, stop doing this. You're like, okay. I just won't say anything. I just won't do anything. When we promote a religion that is more about what you don't do than what you do, we are silencing and inhibiting vision from people who go, okay, I don't know how to get better, but I would love something that's more important than my issues. I would love to be more passionate about something that I'm supposed to do than just being told all the things I'm not supposed to do. And as a result, if we're not careful, men just get inward and inward and inward and inward. Okay, I'll be quiet. Okay, I'll act nice. I'll act good. Okay. And this is not just men. This is people. Okay. Until eventually we just blow up and we have some meltdown. And it was avoidable. We were called to live out our voice and our vision. God did not create you to live fully under someone else's voice and someone else's vision. So we look at Exodus chapter 2 that says it was God and he was speaking to Moses about a very specific leadership position. But what we don't consider is that there was a third character, and it was a bush that was on fire but not being consumed. And it was that got the attention of Moses. Someone living out, I say a bush, the someone was the bush, that was living out a life that didn't look common and didn't look natural. It looked different. Why aren't you being consumed? Why aren't you burning up? And it draws this experience where God is able to communicate with somebody like Moses, and the bush was useful. It was a useful character because it was living at its full height, not through a verbal position, but through a position of expression. It was accurately expressing its calling through its action. It was living out something that told a story that draws Moses in. And I'm telling you, at very least, here's what God's done in my life over the last 12 months. I've felt far more like the burning bush than Moses for the last 12 months. I know that God's doing something, and even though I can't fully put words on it, I'm going to live it out. I'm going to stay committed. I'm going to stay here until God gives words that will explain the illumination. And I have to have the illumination first. I have to have clarity from God first, because when God gives me clarity, then I can give it my words. But if I don't have the illumination, I can just live it out. I can just live it out. And I know this. I know there are people that are watching my life right now going, what are we doing? How's this going to work? What about this? What about that? Why don't you do weddings? Why aren't you a counselor? Because I'm making an effort to live at my full height, in my full calling, with my full voice, and I'm not alone. There's nothing I want more for people that call Shiloh home than to experience exactly that, even if it comes at suffering. Because when you're suffering to get closer to who you are, it is worth it. When you're suffering, it feels like you're drawn away from who you're supposed to be. That is soul crushing. We have placed a premium on being right. I wonder, boy, this is going to ruffle some feathers. I know that it will. But I wonder if the church wasn't the first example of a cancel culture. Canceled if you don't say it right. Canceled if you don't do it right. The Pharisees were mad because Jesus couldn't get it right. You're not able to live up to our standard. If you can't say it right, then what? Then what? Be quiet. Don't speak. If you can't say the things that we want you to say, if you can't live the way that we want you to live, then be quiet. What should it be? Listen, silence is deafening when your voice is needed. A dark room isn't scary if you're not moving. What's scary about a dark room if you just want to sit still? Don't go out. Don't do this. Don't say that. Don't drink that. Don't eat that. Don't go there. Don't hang out with those people. Okay, so what is it? Darkness. Okay, darkness isn't scary if I wasn't going to go anywhere. Darkness is scary when I want to move and I want to do something, but I'm not sure where to go. I wonder if that's what we're experiencing, is this overcorrection from the world that experienced cancel culture. So if you can't say it right or do it right, you have to get out. You can no longer exist in the conversation. You have to get out. You're no longer of value. Silence. If the church didn't live that out first, we put such a premium on being right. I am sick. I am sick to death of this need to get it right or else be silenced. It's the best part of the sermon right here. Ready? We're hanging out with my nephews today. And one of them, they ask him a question. He listens, and his answer is, you're going to have to ask him that word. What he meant was, you're going to have to ask him that question. He didn't say it right. He said it, technically, he said it wrong. He is trying in his brain to work out the expression. What he's trying to indicate is, go over there with that and ask him, because maybe I'd like to hear his answer too. But he doesn't say it that way. He says, you're going to have to ask him that word. He said it wrong. He expressed it incorrectly. Let me give some people some freedom. And if you haven't heard any other part of this sermon, hear this. It is 1,000% okay, according to the kingdom software that doesn't want you to be silenced and doesn't want you to be confused. It is absolutely okay to learn by doing. This church learns by doing. Listen, I am an easy target to criticize because we have gotten things wrong before, because as a church, we learn by doing. We don't know, let's try it, and let's take inventory of what we're learning. We're going to learn by doing. It is okay to, like sometimes, listen, sometimes it is walking that turns on the lights. That's not what the cancel culture, the spiritual cancel culture of silence and confusion says. It says, wait till the lights come on. And until the lights come on, don't you move. Just sit there. Sit there and quiet. Don't you say anything. You said it wrong. That's not how you ask that question. That's not the word that you use. See, the nature of sin is condemnation and shame and fear. And God goes, you can learn by doing. You hand a little kid a hammer and a nail, and you're not asking him to build a house. You're just saying, learn how this stuff works. Learn by doing. Sometimes, talking teaches us how to speak. Sometimes you say something and you go, wait a minute. I said that, but that doesn't make sense. And it reveals something you didn't know. It opens the door to learning something that you needed to know. Are you with me? The kingdom software is open your mouth, open your words, like be willing to communicate. Sometimes it means that you're speaking. Sometimes it means you're living it out. But either way, the idea is not to withdraw you from the conversation. Let me say it this way. Risk getting it wrong. Risk saying it wrong. The kingdom of God is not fear. The kingdom software is love. Love opens the door for a lot of mistakes. Some of my favorite moments with my kids have been times when they got it wrong, trying to get it right. Saying it the wrong way, doing it the wrong way, but actively participating in their lives. Ooh. JD, you're gonna hear from JD Krause, and he talked about this off camera. And I wish we would have gotten back to it in the discussion. You won't hear it next week. But he said he started punching the heavy bag again. And I didn't know this, but he said they have started prescribing punching a heavy bag to people with Alzheimer's. Because what they find is that Alzheimer's is sort of a physical representation of what we're talking about, where people begin to turn inward. You know, their editor starts to kind of turn off, and they start to stop living at their full height, and they start to kind of look inward. And something about just rage punching a heavy bag, just this moment of pure resistance. No. And he's punching this heavy bag. Something about that triggers a more healthy version of mental health. I'm not a doctor. Listen, I am not a doctor. But there's something deep in me that it goes, that makes sense. I want to rage against silence. I want to rage against the darkness that causes me to just sit still and be so afraid I'm going to get it wrong. The kingdom software, Jesus said, I don't want you to be silent, and I don't want you to stay confused. God will bring you through things that are confusing. God will bring you through seasons like, I don't really get this, but he's not asking you to stop, and he's not asking you to be silent. He is putting a premium on your voice. Why do we ask for volunteers at church? Why? Because you matter. We don't ask for volunteers because other people matter. We ask for volunteers because you bring something of value to the table. You matter. Sometimes you're going to speak. Sometimes you're going to be a bush that goes through something we couldn't imagine, and you're not going to be consumed, and you're going to be okay. What if your goal was that you wanted to find 15 things that you're wrong about this year? I want to know 15 things that I thought it was this, turns out it was that. How are you going to get there? By moving. by using your voice, by asking questions, by participating, by being active, an active participant in your own life. How exciting would that be if you found out 15 things that you were wrong about, because that means you can replace it with what? New and better information. See, the software of fear, the sin nature says, careful, somebody's going to find out you're wrong. Don't say too much. Mark Twain says it's better to be a fool and be thought of as a fool than open your mouth and prove them right. But Mark Twain didn't write the Bible. God goes, who are you afraid of? Speak, say something, talk, get it out there, air it out. Like have your group of people that you can invest in, have your small circles, but then give your life, give your identity to something bigger. Plug yourself in, be a part of it. Don't give up on your voice. Don't give up on your thoughts. Listen, it's okay to even go, here's my voice. Ready? I don't know what I'm doing. That's still a voice. Because there may be somebody that goes, you too? I'm in that same season. Or I didn't know what I was doing. But this is what I did. And you too? We're participating. And actually, your voice can bring illumination in somebody else's life. That process of internal dialogue. We can begin to win the battle that says, wait a minute, I know that God's active in my life. I know God's active in my life. I'm living according to the kingdom software that says I can speak. I'm allowed to participate. I'm allowed to be a part of the world that I live in. I'm allowed to matter in the world that I live in, not because I get it right, but because God says that I'm important, that I have an identity, and that I matter. That's what it means to live according to the kingdom software, is allowing God to bring you through those seasons and bring illumination and retain a voice that says that I matter and I'm going to give God my participation in the world that he's placed me in. Let me pray. Lord, I love that Jesus sees a man that has had silence forced upon him from an outside source. And you see the damage internally that brings. That chapter goes on later to say that the illumination that goes on internally matters and is important. You don't bring us to seasons of confusion to leave us there. God, you bring us to places of confusion so that we can get a deeper revelation. God, the only confusion you bring us through is to a better good on the other side. God, for people who feel like they're not living at their full height or at their full volume, I pray that you begin to replace that fear that is their software, that fear that dominates their internal dialogue, that fear that is the voice in their head. You begin to replace that with kingdom software that says that they're loved, not because they get it right, but because you placed a premium and a value on them. That even when we don't have exactly the right words, even when we discover areas where we were wrong and we readjust our opinions, God, that's what it means to participate in life. I pray for freedom in that. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.